we're building fully on-chain games, which means that our games are actually technically more complicated than most. They're built entirely using smart contracts, and so in a lot of ways we're like more crypto forward. But despite that, our guiding principle has always been hide the crypto. Essentially, players aren't coming to your game because you're on this chain or that chain. You have to essentially give them a core need, whether that's play to earn, which is greed, or just to be entertained, right? And so for us, the guiding principle has always been build something people want, and in the case of games, that's build something fun. And then the second part of it is meet the users where they are, and so that's mobile platforms, that's the Epic Game Store, it's Steam, it's make it easy for people to find your game, play it, and so I believe that the one other thing here is that like with games, you don't need network effects, right? Like if a game is fun to a single person, you've satisfied that need for that player. You don't. It's not like a social network where you need like all of your friends there or a ton of content like an Instagram or something like that. It's just even if you make a fun game, you can entertain that single person, and you need to do nothing else. So in a lot of ways, games are really pure in terms of build something people want and make it easy for them to find you. For us, and the way that I look at it is that, and from coming from console games to social games and now to Web3 gaming. I always look at like what is the uniqueness, the new thing of the platform. Obviously, free markets is part of it, but the reason that I got into this was Farmville, 300 million players, $1 billion of revenue. In 2020, the game was shut down because it was never ported to mobile, and that entire community just like disappeared. All the investment in the game was just gone, right? And so I think for the players, there's a couple interesting things. A lot of these are like kind of elder player type benefits, but one is that these games can actually, for us, run forever. They're fully on chain, which essentially means the community continues to sustain it as long as they want. Two, fully on chain games are completely open source and completely open data, which essentially means that anyone can remix it, expand upon it. So much of the greatest gaming experiences came from modding, Counter-Strike, Dota, which then became League of Legends, and it came from like innovation within the community itself, not just from the original developers. And then three, when I think about, and I actually agree entirely with what you said about games as a network, to me the reason to build Web3 games is because of the social collaboration and social interaction that happens within the community. Like that is the thing. These aren't just MMOs. These are like the most like hyper MMOs that have ever existed. The PvP is not just in the game. The PvP is in the marketplace. It's in the Discord. And if you look at something like an EVE Online, that game is sustained not because of the underlying game mechanics, but because it enabled emergent gameplay. The ability for people to be the content for each other through the way they organize in guilds, the way they compete with each other, the way they collaborate. And so when I think about Web3 games and what they can enable for players in terms of new gaming experiences, it's really about creating this like these newly fully fleshed out interaction models between the players within the game itself. So people come for the game, but then they stay for the community. And we see that in every MMO that's ever come before it. And I'm like a purist when it comes to game design. It's about giving players an interesting set of choices with agency and consequence. And when you have real trading economies, when you have real stakes, it just amps that, right? It creates just more consequence for players, and so for a certain type of player, that's really amazing. For builders, I think there's a couple things that are interesting about Web3. One is it upends the user acquisition model. Like you said, you can essentially give tokens to incentivize people to try your game out. I think of it like the free samples at a supermarket. Try this thing out. Some people will just try it and leave, but some people will buy the package and stick around, right? And then the second is the secondary market economies. I don't think people quite understand what that means in terms of lifetime value of users. And so in a traditional gaming world, it's mobile gaming, it's about you figure out what the lifetime value of your user is, the amount it takes to acquire a new customer, and you try to find profitable spend, that arbitrage between those two numbers. And then you spend that on ads, and you can just put infinite dollars into it, and that's how you grow your game. It's possible in Web3 to essentially add a new revenue stream that shifts that LTV curve. So for example, in a normal game, I sell you items, I sell you DLC, or I sell you the game or whatever, and that's how I make revenue. in Web3, it's possible you also get creator royalties from the secondary marketplaces of the exchange of value between your player base, right? And this is, you see this on OpenSea with like whatever percentage creators are taking. So that is then shifting the LTV curve, which now means that potentially there's a way for Web3 games to actually more profitably acquire new users. And my view of this is, as soon as one company gets to scale, it may be someone on the stage, right, that gets there, right? It's gonna be a wake-up call to all the other Web2 developers to be like, oh, we actually cannot compete for you to acquire new users versus these Web3 companies that have actually more stable, more more profitable business models. So there's something very interesting there that this may actually end up being the thing that actually shifts not just this crypto, but actually brings more Web2 developers into Web3.
You guys bring up some interesting points, especially about like you mentioned rewarding users early on, right? Building that, it's almost like you're empowering your go-to-market. Like you're getting feedback faster, you're getting better feedback, you're getting quality users, trying your product. Just putting on my Web2, like traditional gamer hat, does that ruin the purity of some of the process? And I go back to like the folks that go in early in a community, start giving feedback, start building mods before things get popular. Does it ruin any of that, or does it just empower it?
You have to be careful with it. It's easy. Incentives, I think, can mask true numbers, true retention numbers, and give the illusion of product market fit. And the problem with incentives is eventually they either run out, and you end up realizing that half your user base churned because it turns out they actually didn't like your game. They were just there for the free samples, right? So, one of the things that we look at both in terms of game design and incentive design is like, what's the actual truth of the matter? Like, how do we have our cake and eat it too? And it is really kind of towing the line here. I don't think it's like, it's a more complex and nuanced narrative than just incentives good or incentives bad, right? It's really about like, how do you use it to, essentially give people a reason to try something out and like kind of cut through the noise of acquiring that initial user, but then also ensure that, once they get into your game universe, there's actually something real there, either it's community, the gameplay, whatever it is, to capture and retain them, ensure that they're actually at the heart having fun. And so I think something that's interesting is like, as more games are going to mobile is like the jungle, it's the survival of the fittest in terms of, how people spend their time. And that's really where you're gonna end up seeing, especially because you can't like put incentives in people's faces in the same way you can on the web, that you're actually gonna see kind of some of these projects either like, float or sink. It just turns out that every new iteration of gaming is like people hate on it, right? Like pretty much directly. Like it's just like, it's almost like part of the cycle. It's just like haters gonna hate, and we saw it, we saw it with social gaming. People like, oh, those aren't real games. Those are scam games. They're spammy, and then, but it turns out that really like what people were afraid of is that they're going to stop getting their Call of Duties or whatever AAA console games. But no, it was the opposite. It was like we actually dramatically expanded the market for gaming. And I actually think now, like when I actually ask people, I'm like, are you gamers? So many people say no, and I'm like, oh, like, do you, like, what do you do on the weekends? Oh, or I do play board games. I like, I do. I'm like, you're a gamer. It's just you have the term gamer is like the identity of gamer has just been co-opted, right? And so when I think about the same thing here in Web3 with like the term NFT, it's like a dirty word. Like we don't use the word anywhere in any of our products anymore. There's like no point to it. And I think Off the Grid did a really good job with this too, of just like, it's just a great game that happens to have this like crypto thing in the back. And so I think two things. One is that like the broad like negativity around this stuff is just, it's always going to be there. And I think like part of, being a leader in the space is just like ignoring it, building what you think is going to be a great product experience, moving the state of the art forward. And then the second thing that I keep coming back to, and is kind of like a mantra now in consumer, is just distribution is king. How do we find distribution? Where do we get distribution? Like, it's not, in my opinion, it's not crypto Twitter, right? It's not crypto natives. I think you have to go broader, you have to think bigger. And so, for us, it's just like all day, every day, where's distribution coming from? How do we service those users? And I don't think we've successfully cracked that yet in a repeatable way. I think we're starting to. I mean, maybe these guys are like leading the pack there, and excited to see what they do so we can learn from it. But I think it still comes down to the same thing: distribution. For us, I'm going to piggyback on what you said and also just answer the direct question, which is, you cannot not be crypto native as a founder, which basically means you have to understand tokens, you have to understand incentives, you have to understand community building. Like, that is the new of building in this space. You can't just be a Web2 developer and be like, you know what, I know how to build games. Like, we've done that before. And like, even then, this has been like a very steep growth learning curve for me personally on like community building, on incentive design, on marketing. You know, like, I'm not a Twitter native person, and like there's a channel that my team has which they like force me to tweet, you know, and just to get the word out and like be a face of the company. And like, so there's just like certain things you have to do to just like understand this business more deeply, and it's a lot of it is around like this idea of free economies and so on. It's just a different way of game design, incentive design, and product development. And for us, you know, I don't think we're at scale yet. Like, I would not say we're at scale yet. In fact, I think we're tapping out our existing channels to some degree. You know, we essentially, you know, we used an incentive system, and we had incentivized referrals for Pirate Nation. You know, we had about 250,000 people come and play the game and mint a pirate, of which about 60,000 today are still playing the game, which is pretty good. Our retention numbers do look good from that perspective. But, you know, like Farmville, 30 million DAU. Right? To me, this is just the morsel. This is the amuse-bouche of you know, scale. And so, you know, I'm a huge believer in what I said earlier, that like you have to go where the users are, right? And now then the question is like, now take this mind of what we learned about incentive design in crypto Twitter, and like, how do we kind of package this and you know, breadcrumb people from being a person who's on the App Store clicking install all the way through. Now they're trading, they're joining guilds, they're trading on the free marketplace. Like, what does that user path look like? And I'm extremely excited to actually build and figure that stuff out as we launch our mobile app. But that's going to be our growth strategy, is like go to the app stores, go to mobile, build guilds, help people get into communities, and then see how it goes from there. We're launching season 3 of our game literally today. So talking about incentive design and so on, we switched up the meta. Really excited it's going out today. And then, you know, we're basically full steam ahead on building guilds and more of these social features that actually make Web3 games Web3. So we're just really excited to have that go out today.